Namaste, everybody, and welcome to today's Facebook Live program on managing the Vata Dosha. Today we'll be talking about the many facets of the Vata Dosha and how to keep it in balance so that you're able to remain healthy. Now, you may know that there are different aspects of Vata. Some of you may have a Vata Prakriti or a Vata constitution. The Sanskrit word is Prakriti, which means the original creation. And the original creation is the moment of conception, and it's the balance of the three doshas in that moment. So if you have more of a Vata nature, it means that at that moment, the energy of Vata was predominant within you. And it gives you the tendencies that you're going to carry forward with you for the rest of your life. And we'll talk about those tendencies because knowing those tendencies is really the key to keeping yourself in balance. Now, some of you may have a Vata Vikriti, and Vikriti means what happens after creation. And so after creation, you're affected by your environment. You're affected by your diet, and you're affected by your lifestyle. You're affected by the weather. You're affected by the seasons. There are all these different factors affecting you, and that's called your Vikriti. And so a lot of people use that term for your imbalance. So you might have a Vata imbalance, and that could happen to anybody of any constitution. I think that's really important to understand. People of Vata nature will have the tendency to have a Vata imbalance, but anybody can have a Vata imbalance if the qualities of Vata are increased within them. And so we'll talk about that. Now, some people have Vata symptoms. And let's briefly talk about the symptoms of Vata before we get into how to control the Vata dosha. So the common symptoms of Vata dosha would include things such as excessive dryness in the body, which can take the form of dry skin or constipation. That dryness in the intestines interferes with digestion, and so it also tends to cause an accumulation of gas. Vata tends to be cold, so there's an increase in coldness. So when you're out of balance in Vata, you might feel unusually chilled. And that coldness within your intestines also contributes to constipation and to gas. Another common general symptom of Vata imbalance would be difficulty with sleeping. So if you're having restless sleep, difficulty with digestion, particularly constipation and gas, and you're feeling cold easily, well, those are all signs that you might have a Vata imbalance. Now, let's talk a little bit more about Vata so that you can understand it on a deeper level. If you really want to understand the Vata dosha, you should first understand that Vata dosha is made up of elements. The elements are air and ether. And these are symbolic. They're not meant to be taken literally in the sense that you're not made up of air and emptiness. I mean, you can argue that there is a level of that is true. But the rishis taught that if you really want to understand the elements, the first thing you should understand is that the elements relate to different concepts. So for instance, ether relates to emptiness and space, and air relates to motion. So you're made up of more space and more motion. These are your tendencies. Then the rishis went on to say, but if you really want to understand the dosha, understand the qualities of those elements, because it's the qualities of those elements that increase in you that cause the disturbances. So for instance, if you have more air and ether within you, then you will tend to be more mobile rather than stable. That means that you'll talk faster, you'll move faster, the mind moves faster. It's hard to stay still in one place. You might change thoughts. It might be difficult to finish what you get started with. You might have an inspiration, but actually following it through can be difficult. So too much mobility is part of what causes difficulty with sleep. If you can't be still, then how can you sleep? And some people are tossing and turning, And when they even try to be still, they feel like they have too much energy inside of them, because even though the body is still, the mind and the energy system is moving too much. So if you understand that people of Vata nature have a tendency to be mobile, and that people with an imbalance in Vata tend to have too much mobility, then the first thing that you think of in order to control Vata is stability. And that's the number one thing that a person of Vata nature should cultivate in order to control Vata. In fact, if you do not cultivate stability, then there is no way to control Vata, because at its core, Vata is motion. And so we need the opposite of that. So how do you do that? Well, one of the ways you do that is by slowing down. If you just slow down, that will do tremendous amounts to control Vata. We live in a very fast-paced, very busy world. And so we're constantly on the go. If you're a parent, you might be driving the kids around, you might be driving around all day. If you are working, you might have to travel from one place to another. Some people are traveling great distances on airplanes every day. Some people are just moving. We're all moving. You know, we have so much going on. We have our plans in the evening. We have our plans on the weekend. From the moment we get up, some people get up moving. They jump out of bed. They got to take a quick shower. How fast do you take that shower? The faster you take that shower, the more you're disturbing the Vata dosha. I just came back from Japan, and one of the things that I really admired about the Japanese tradition is the morning soak in the bath. Yeah, what a nice ritual. And the showers are such that you sit on the floor, and then you can wash yourself and put oil on yourself, and then you can just go right into the bathtub. What a wonderful way to start the morning, especially if you're Vata dosha. Slow down. That's really the key. You know, when you talk about how fast people are moving, people are also eating quickly. We have so much going on inside of us that it translates into every behavior. So we're eating fast. We might want to finish lunch in 10 minutes so that we can go and run another errand. How silly is that? So fast, fast, fast. We just keep on moving. And then we're hurrying. We want to hurry up so that we can relax in the evening. Maybe we'll have a little bit of time to relax. That's kind of silly. So if you're Vata nature, you want your lifestyle to become slower, more relaxed, more still. You want to take your time in the morning, which may mean getting up a little bit earlier. You want to sit down to eat. Don't eat in the car. Don't eat while you're doing anything else. Be still. Take some time to really be with your food. That stillness controls the Vata dosha. And when you cultivate this stillness, it's going to help you with any Vata imbalance, whether you're dealing with insomnia, or you're dealing with constipation and gas, whether you're dealing with chronic pain. Chronic pain is another sign of Vata dosha imbalance, especially if that pain is moving around the body. It shifts from one place to another. You never feel quite right. So if you're dealing with any kind of Vata imbalance, this is the number one thing that you could do, is to create stability. Now, another very important quality for Vata is the quality of coldness versus heat. Now, everything in nature is either hot or cold. So people with a Vata nature have the tendency to be cold. That's one of the qualities of air and ether. So if you tend to be cold, then, or if Vata has risen too much, then you might get easily chilled. You might be walking around with a shawl on. You might be always turning up the heat, putting on empty blankets, putting on extra blankets. That's how you know that you have a more Vata nature. And you want to do the opposite. You want to be able to create warmth because you're not comfortable when you're cold. Now, because we get so uncomfortable by temperature, we're usually pretty good about managing that one. We'll bring around an extra sweater, or we'll take with us an extra shawl, something to put on our lap if we're watching a movie and it's air conditioned, because you know you don't like to be cold. But you can also increase the warmth within you by drinking some warm water. You can drink warm ginger tea. You can carry warm ginger tea with you. Ginger is a wonderfully warming herb that'll warm your whole system and increase your circulation and increase the strength of your Agni. and help it to become more steady if you sip on it throughout the course of the day. So this can be a wonderful way to increase the heat in your body. You increase the heat in your body through all the spices that you take. So people with a Vata nature should take more spice with their meals. Now, it shouldn't be extra hot. We'll get into the reasons why later, but it should be warm. You shouldn't have cold food. In fact, cooked food, let's just begin with cooked food, is warmer than uncooked food. And then it becomes warmer still if you add spices to it. So do that, and now you're going to have more warmth in your body. And you also create some warmth through exercise. So get moderate exercise, not too much. Don't run too much, because if you get too much exercise, you know what's going to happen. You're going to increase your mobility too much. If you're running long distances, and you gotta hurry up in the morning so you can get out and run, and then you do that run for 10 miles. Well, that's a little bit excessive for Vata, and that's going to contribute to more Vata imbalance as well. Stillness is what Vata needs. Maybe go to a yoga class, do a little bit of meditation in the morning, cultivate that stillness. Of course, it's hard, I know, because there's so much energy inside you want to get it out. So some people run to get that out, but we have to learn how to tone down that energy so that we can become still. And we have to become warm. And these are two very important components of treating the Vata dosha. Another way we can create warmth is through the sour taste. The sour taste is warming. Not just the spicy taste from the hot spices, but sour foods, fermented foods. This has a warmth that actually is more lasting than the spicy foods. The spicy foods create a short-term, quick burst of warmth in you, and you feel good, and it helps your digestion, and that's nice. But the sour taste is what's going to sustain your digestion. It's what's going to sustain your warmth. It's going to set the thermostat higher within you on an ongoing basis. That's a really, really important thing to do. So more sour taste, bring that into the diet as well. Anything you can do to create warmth in your environment is great. It's fine to turn up the heat. It's good to go out and just soak in the sun for a little while. Not excessively, but a good amount of heat will really help the Vata dosha. Now, the Vata dosha, another tendency is the quality of lightness. Vata tends to be light. And so the opposite of light is heavy. And so if you tend to be light, then you want to bring in more heaviness. The lightness shows up in Vata, particularly in the form of weight loss. So if you have a Vata imbalance, you might be underweight. But, you also have to be light to move so fast and to think so fast. When the mind is heavy, you slow down a lot. So lightness can not just be of the body, it can also be of the mind. And so you want to cultivate a little bit more heaviness. So that means to take foods that have the heavy quality. That means to take foods that have substance to them. A certain amount, we might call them comfort foods. So for instance, worm milk would be a wonderful thing for a person of Vata nature to take. It has a certain heaviness to it. You take it warm. You might want to take it with some spices so that it's more easily digested. That's an example of how to cultivate the heavy quality within you. Nuts are also an example, and so are oils. These all cultivate the heavy quality within you. Any food that has more substance will bring in that heaviness. And you want to avoid the things that cultivate lightness. You want to avoid living on too many salads and just having raw fruit and smoothies. They don't have enough substance for you. Now, these are wonderfully healthy foods. And everything is right for someone in Ayurveda, and nothing is right for everyone. Ayurveda is a path of helping you to understand what's going to be right for you as a unique individual. And if you have a Vata imbalance or a predominance of Vata in your constitution, then you have to be sure not to cultivate too much lightness. You need to cultivate a little greater amount of body fat, perhaps, than you're used to. All right. Now that's particularly true if you're underweight. In fact, when people are very, very sick in Ayurveda, one of the heaviest foods we can give somebody is meat. Now, maybe not. In Ayurveda, we anti-vegetarian lifestyle. Promote the vegetarian lifestyle because it is a lifestyle that keeps the mind and consciousness clear, it keeps the heart clear, and easier to keep the heart open. But when it comes to medicine, there are times when you're sick or when you're out of balance that we do use meat in Ayurveda. And when you have a severe Vata imbalance, we may use meat or meat products in order to bring balance to the body. So in traditional Ayurveda, it's not unusual to consume a certain amount of meat, to use bone soups and bone marrow in a variety of different preparations. And one of the qualities of those substances is that they're heavy. And so when somebody is very, very light, very, very frail, then we condone the use of these meat products in order to get that quality back and to stabilize the life of that individual. Now, another quality of Vata is the quality of dryness. And so people of Vata nature have that tendency to be dry, and when they're out of balance, they become too dry. They'll get dry skin, dry eyes, dry mouth, dry intestines, dry nose. Everything becomes a little bit too dried out. And when you become too dried out, you lose your energy too. You can get too dried out by life, and you just can start becoming more negative because you're too dried out by life. So in order to stay balanced, the person of Vata nature has to be nourished. Sometimes we say we want them to be more juicy. And when they're more juicy about life in general, and they'll be happier and more content. And so you really want to avoid getting too dried out. So how do you get too dried out in Ayurveda? Well, one of the ways you can get too dried out is to not take enough oils into your body. If you're not taking enough oil in your body is going to get dry. Your skin is going to crack. Your tongue is going to crack. Everything is going to start to dry out. The tissues need oil in order to be moist and soft and young and flexible. Now, another way to dry out, though, is to take in too many things that are too hot. If something is too hot, very, very hot spices, spending too much time in the sun, going into saunas too much, all of this will dry you out too. It'll dry you out of your water, and it'll dry you out eventually the oils within you as well. So it's important not to excessively indulge in the heat, because it is the heat that will cause dryness. And to make sure that you cultivate the moistness. So nuts, for instance, are a great way to bring oils into your body. You can cook with sesame oil. Sesame oil is the best oil for Vata. Another very, very good oil. You really can't go wrong with it, especially with the proper for nature. And so that is going to be very, very balancing for a person of Vata nature. All right. Another quality to look at is sharpness versus dullness. So if a person of Vata nature has the tendency toward sharpness, that sharpness is more like a needle, an irritation inside that they might feel. When they're out of balance, they may start feeling more irritated. Vata does have a sharp nature, and so they want to cultivate more dullness. I know that sounds a little bit silly, but what it really means is to take in things that have a dulling nature that's going to allow more calmness rather than agitation, because agitation is very sharp. And so that dullness can be cultivated with things like milk, and soft cheeses can be very good, cream, oils. All of these have a more dulling nature on the mind. These are the same substances that were heavy. Many of the heavy substances have also a dulling quality on the mind, which you wouldn't think you want a dulling quality on the mind, but if your mind is constantly moving, constantly in a state of overexcitement perhaps, or fluctuating a lot, then you want that dullness, because that dullness is going to support stability, it's going to support slowing down, and it's going to support being still. So that's really important. And you want to avoid the things that increase sharpness. So hot spices, too hot, when they're really, really hot, then that's going to get too sharp, and it's going to cause dryness too. And that's going to cause a person of Vata nature to feel more irritable. And that should be avoided then. So we want spice. We want it to be moderate to hot, but not very, very hot. All right. Similarly, another quality of Vata is rough, and the opposite of that is smooth. So we want to avoid anything that is going to be rough. So for instance, if a person of Vata nature went for a massage, they would benefit from a smooth massage, not a rough massage. And every massage stroke has its own unique qualities. So they want to bring in more smoothness in every facet of their life. Now, you can also take in that smoothness through food. Yogurt is very, very smooth. And so yogurt's a great food for a person of Vata nature as long as it's taken when it is not too cold. Okay, so it should be taken at room temperature. And that yogurt is great because yogurt is not only smooth, it's also dull. It's also warming because it's fermented, and so it has a more of a sour flavor to it. In fact, we want the sour taste. We don't want to overly sweeten the yogurt. Yoga could be sweet, but we don't want to overly sweeten the yogurt because that sour taste is so beneficial for the Agni. And people of Vata nature have a more irregular digestive system. So more yogurt in the diet would be wonderful. People of Vata nature have a quality of being more subtle. And the opposite of that, we use the word gross in Ayurveda. So when you have too much subtlety, it means, again, that you're, first of all, physically less noticeable. And so that could happen when you lose weight or you don't have as much muscle mass, or you tend to hide a little bit more in the corners. You don't want to be seen. This is the nature of the subtle quality. When the mind becomes subtle, that's really interesting because you actually start to pick up on more things around you. The more subtle the mind is, you start to pick up on energy, you start to pick up on feelings, you start to become more sensitive to the world around you as the mind becomes more subtle. So while the body becomes kind of smaller and less noticeable, the mind begins to expand because the mind has a subtle quality. And so you become very, very perceptive. And sometimes that's an imbalance too, because if you become too perceptive of the world, you may be picking up on energies that are not very, you might just be picking up on too much energy. It could be overwhelming to pick up on too much energy. So we don't want to cultivate the subtlety if you're about nature because you already have enough of that. You know, you never not have that. You don't want to cultivate the opposite. You want to cultivate the gross quality, more noticeable, and allow the mind to become less sensitive. So that again happens when you take in things like milk and nuts and oils and even meats if you need them in order to sustain your life. These kinds of things decrease the subtle nature of the body and the mind. And by the way, on the subject of the subtleties, you know, if you start getting into, and many of you will, especially if you're Ayurvedic practitioners, you start getting into some of the more esoteric practices of yoga and Ayurveda. These are subtle practices. So you have to be careful because they increase the subtlety. If you're attending a lot of fire ceremonies, homas and pujas and chanting and doing a lot of pranayama, this can really increase the subtle nature of the body. And that can be a very good thing for a yogi, but that yogi with a Vata nature has to take extra care with their diet and lifestyle to make sure that they don't become too subtle, too sensitive through those practices, or it could become an imbalance, and we certainly don't want to see that. Now, another quality that we look at in Ayurveda is the quality of hardness. People of Vata nature, they're not careful, they become too hard because of that dryness and the lightness. They can become too hard, like an eggshell. That hardness makes them fragile. That hardness is not like a rock. That would be the hardness of earth. Now, it's more like the hardness of an eggshell. It's the hardness of being dried out and having a thin, hard exterior around you. And when that happens, it contains your energy. You tend to become very, very serious, not smiling a lot. This happens from the hardness. It goes along with dryness, and it's the end result of these qualities becoming out of balance. And when that happens, you need softness. You need softness. Now, the first thing that I think about when I think about softness is I think about love. I think about a hug. You know, when you're feeling that way and you're hard and you're contained and you're just trying to hold it together, a hug is really important. It's going to nourish your heart. It's going to soften your heart, soften the exterior. It's really, really important. It's got to be a very soft, smooth kind of quality to that hug. Now, in addition, you want to avoid things that cause hardness. So any food that is hard, you want to try to avoid. So I think of a pretzel, especially those thick, hard pretzels. If you were to eat a thick, hard pretzel, that'll really aggravate Vata Dosha. But even the thin ones do too. And really anything that is crunchy is going to aggravate the Vata Dosha. It has a hardness, and then as it breaks apart, it has a roughness, and it has a sharpness to it. This is not good for you. So potato chips and corn chips and pretzels, this would be the wrong food. It's going to cultivate more hardness within you. On the other hand, you want softness. So think about gooey foods. Think about gooey foods. Anything that is gooey probably is going to be good for you. I think about soft mochi, for instance. Mochi is that Japanese rice that you can buy and cook and bake, and it puffs up and it's gooey on the inside with all that rice. Not the ice cream mochi, but the real mochi. Anything that is gooey is probably going to be good for you. Anything that is runny at that point is going to be good for you, or better for you than something that is going to be hard if you have that hard, fragile exterior right now. And so think about soft. Think about sauces. Sauces are soft. They're oily. And so you want more oil in your diet. Oil will really soften you up. In fact, if you oil your body every single day, your body's going to remain soft. Your heart's going to remain soft. Your mind is going to remain soft. You can just remain soft and more flexible throughout the course of your life. That could be a really great thing to do if you are of Vata nature. So do that Abhyanga every single day. And then cloudy and clear. Cloudy and clear is another quality of Vata Dosha. People of Vata nature have the tendency to be clear, not cloudy. And so and clarity sounds like a good thing in the mind. But what happens if your mind becomes too clear is that things come in and things go out really, really fast, and you become forgetful. And so we want a little bit more cloudiness in there so that we can retain what we learn and what we experience. It helps the memory. If you become too clear, it's in one ear and out the other. So that kind of clarity is good for being perceptive. People of Vata nature are very, very sensitive to the world around them. But too much clarity can become a problem. So again, those same things that were cloudy, the same things that were smooth and heavy tend to have a cloudier effect on the mind. So meat makes the mind cloudier, milk makes the mind cloudier, nuts make the mind cloudier, oils make the mind cloudier. So all those comfort foods tend to make the mind cloudier. Now, you don't want to go too far with that, but you do want to remain balanced. And I think at this point we've talked about all the qualities except flowing and dense. And flowing for Vata is gracefulness. I think of it as gracefulness. People of Vata nature tend to move a lot. And when they move, they tend to move in an irregular manner, and that can be a challenge. That irregular manner, it has sharp, jagged edges. Like a bumblebee that goes here and then there and there. You want to move in a more regular manner, a more regular pattern. And when you do, that movement becomes graceful. And so when we talk about the need for Vata to become more dense, it means, and dense is the opposite of flowing, it means to take their movements and to make them more regular in nature. That's how I interpret it, and I think that that's really important. So to stay on course is very, very important, and to move in the world in a graceful manner where we don't bump into things. And that requires mindfulness, and it requires a sensitivity, not an overwhelm, but a real mindfulness of what's going on around us. What I've just done is I've just covered the 10 pairs of opposite qualities as they relate to Vata Dosha. And these are called the Guruvadi Gunas, or the qualities that begin. Guruvadi means begins with heavy, although we started it talking about the mobile quality, but they're the Guruvadi Gunas, the 10 pairs of opposite qualities. And if you pay attention to those 10 pairs of qualities within you, if you have a Vata imbalance, and you identify which quality is most out of balance within me, and you live life so that you do not exacerbate that quality, and you bring in the opposite quality, then you're guaranteed of keeping the Vata Dosha in balance. And if you keep the Vata Dosha in balance, what that means is that you're going to slow down your internal aging process. You're going to be much healthier. You're going to be much more content. And your full nature will emerge. And your full nature, if you're of a Vata nature, is to be truly enthusiastic and to allow that divine light to flow through you in a sustainable manner. Not to be bubbly and bouncy, but to have that bright light in your eye, that light that is joy. And to have that joy inside your heart and to live with that joy 24/7 is really the goal of Ayurveda. When you are balanced, you will be in joy. You will be living in the light. You will be experiencing, able to experience love. And you will be able to share that love with others. Because when you're balanced, that is your natural state. So I wish you all a wondrous journey as you strive to create balance in your life. May you all be well. May you all be balanced. And for those of you with a Vata nature, may you be still. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om peace, peace, peace. Many blessings, everybody. Have a beautiful journey.